Debbie Thorne sat at the table, grading 6th grade math papers. Most teachers had left for home after the day's work, but Debbie deliberately lingered at the school to casually attend a meeting in the principal's office. Debbie had been working at the school for about 9 years, joining right after college. Back then, she felt like the world was at her feet. Young, charming, and ambitious, Debbie believed in working at the best school or marrying a king. Despite having many admirers, she held out for that elusive prince. However, as time passed, all her friends got married and had children, while Debbie remained alone. Now, at 32, she was ready to latch onto any man who seemed promising. 2 months ago, a new principal arrived at the school, the handsome and imposing Jerry man, 35 years old, impeccably dressed in an expensive suit and driving a prestigious car. All the female teachers took notice. Seeing Jerry for the first time, Debbie knew it was time to act. Even Jerry's wedding ring didn't deter her. "Oh God, he's the one I need," Debbie said when the introductory meeting with the new principal concluded. She had already formulated a plan to ensnare him. "Doesn't it bother you that he's married?" asked Debbie's friend Kyla, a literature teacher. "No," shrugged Debbie. "Should it? He has a wife, you know. A living person, for that matter. Well, she's had him for a while. Let others have a turn," frowned the math teacher. "What's the big deal? People just don't do that." Kyla disapprovingly shook her head. "And remember, you're a teacher. Your behavior should be exemplary, setting an example for the children. I don't broadcast my personal life on social media like others. Many see me as a crazy old maid obsessed with breeding flowers. But I want love and affection," retorted Debbie. "Debbie, that's not the way. You can't interfere in someone else's family just because you are tired of being alone," Kyla advised. "It's easy for you to say. You are married with 2 kids. I want to be a wife and a mother too," replied Debbie. "You will, for sure. You'll meet a man, your man, who'll be just yours." "When?" Debbie angrily inquired. "Tomorrow, in a month, a year. Just a little patience," shrugged Kyla. "I'm tired of waiting because I want to be happy now," Debbie snapped. "And don't meddle in my personal life." The woman stood up and left the office. After that, the 2 friends didn't speak for 2 weeks. During this time, Debbie managed to befriend the principal, becoming indispensable to him. Despite this, Jerry often complained about his troubled relationship with his wife, much to Debbie's delight. When the friends reconciled, Kyla was unpleasantly surprised by the friendship between her friend and the principal. However, she decided not to say anything about it. Let Debbie handle it herself. Debbie sighed heavily and closed her eyes. Today's test showed that the 6th graders had no knowledge of the multiplication table, especially 12-year-old Finn Coleman. Her thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. "Hey, brother," Debbie said joyfully, answering the call. "Hey, sister," Martin replied. "Any plans for the evening?" "None," said the woman. Her mood immediately soured. Debbie remembered how she wanted to arrange a romantic evening for her beloved, but he declined, stating that he had an important family dinner. "Then I'll see you at our restaurant at 7 tonight," Martin said happily. "What's the occasion?" Debbie asked. "I want to introduce my family to my future wife's family." The man sighed happily. "You're getting married?" Debbie gasped. She felt conflicting emotions. On one hand, she was thrilled for her brother. Martin and his girlfriend Carol had been together for 5 years. But on the other hand, her younger 30-year-old brother was getting married soon, while she had no prospects. It was time to change that. "Yes," Martin sighed. But Debbie heard the happiness in his voice. "It's Carol's idea. Don't believe him," shouted Carol in the background. "It was a mutual decision." "I know." Debbie smiled. She overcame herself and felt joy for her brother. She heard how happy he was. Carol came into Martin's life at the right time. He was going through a tough period after their beloved mother passed away. Their family fought for her life until the very end, but a cunning illness didn't give them a chance. Martin was always by his mother's side, as he had been closest to her since childhood. After their mother's departure, Martin stopped living. Only Carol's arrival brought him back to life. "So, will you come?" Martin asked. "I'll be there. See you tonight," Debbie said. She hung up and sighed. Looking at the clock, she realized there were still 3 hours until the meeting at the cafe. She gathered the graded notebooks and approached the mirror. "You look good." "Damn it." Debbie winked at herself. She was going on a date with Jerry. She wanted to convince her man to join her at the cafe. At that moment, Kyla entered the teacher's lounge. "Oh, you're still here," the friend exclaimed. "Yes, checking homework." "And you?" Debbie asked. "I just finished too. Now I'm heading home." "Are you coming?" "No, I still have some things to do here." Debbie shook her head. "If you're planning to see Jerry, he's not in the office. He just left the school with his wife," Kyla said sympathetically. Looking at her friend, Debbie didn't hurry to the cafe, although Martin had called her several times. The woman walked slowly down the street, trying to compose herself. It seemed that Jerry had been lying to her all this time. He got along just fine with his wife. "Stop." The woman abruptly stopped. Maybe Kyla deceived her. After all, her friend had immediately criticized her for being involved with a married principal. "Miss, if you were driving, you would have caused an accident for sure," Debbie heard behind her. Turning around, she saw a young man looking at her disapprovingly. "What did you say?" Debbie looked at the stranger. "I'm saying you need to think not only about yourself, but also about others. You stopped so suddenly that I almost collided with you. Luckily, my reaction is good, and I managed to avoid a collision. Otherwise, you would have blamed me first for pushing you." The man shook his head. "I wouldn't have blamed you," replied the woman seriously. "All you know how to do is make complaints." The man smirked. "Who is you are?" Debbie asked with a challenging tone. "Women, you always present so many complaints to your husbands that it makes your head spin," explained the stranger. "And you, tired of fulfilling your wife's whims, throw foolish accusations at the first woman you meet on the street. Why don't you express all your grievances to your wife? Or are you afraid?" Debbie said with a mocking tone. "Judging by your words, you're a lonely woman, since you don't understand the psychology of men's words and actions. So there's nothing to talk to you about. Goodbye." The stranger walked around Debbie and left. "Go on, misogynist," Debbie shouted after the man. She was boiling with indignation. Some ill-mannered man was trying to dictate to her what she should be like. Let him take care of his own wife and discipline her. Debbie arrived at the cafe, smiling as she entered the building. She was about to reunite with her beloved family. It was just a pity that her mom didn't live to see this joyful occasion. The illness took the woman in just 6 months. Their father paid hefty bills at the best clinic to treat his beloved wife, but nothing helped. When she was gone, their dad withdrew into himself. He lived almost a year with just work. Debbie even thought she would lose her father because of this schedule. But gradually, he managed to overcome depression. The father started smiling again and even looked happy. The first person Debbie saw was her brother Martin, who was saying something, waving his arms. His expression showed that he was upset about something. "Hello, everyone. What's all the noise about?" Debbie approached with a smile. "And you look at our dad," Martin replied, clearly annoyed. Debbie looked at him in surprise. Then she shifted her gaze to the woman sitting next to him. Most likely, the man took the initiative again and, upon learning about his son's wedding, brought a wedding planner with him. And it seemed that Martin didn't like it. "Well, what's wrong with it if Dad decided to organize your wedding? You should thank him for sparing you from many problems," Debbie exclaimed, looking at her brother. "What are you talking about, sister? What problems are you referring to?" Martin asked in bewilderment. "Dad hired a special person to organize your wedding. Isn't that wonderful?" Debbie nodded toward the woman standing next to their father. Daughter, the thing is, Mayim is not a wedding planner. Mr. Thorne shook his head. Then who is she? If she has nothing to do with the event, why is this mysterious woman here? Debbie asked, bewildered. This is my fiancé. Mr. Thorne smiled happily. Who? Debbie shook her head in disbelief. This is Mayim, my fiancé. The man introduced his companion again and took her hand, noticing that his children were not thrilled with his choice. But what about Mom? Debbie whispered. She was stunned by what she heard. Kids, your mom has been gone for 5 years. Of course, I still love her. But life goes on, and you should thank Mayim for pulling me out of the abyss of sorrow. Mr. Thorne sighed. It turned out to be much more complicated than he thought. She's just pulling money out of you. Dad, do you really think that this Mayim can replace Mom for you? Martin said. I don't claim to replace your mom. Mayim quietly spoke, and rightly so. Because you are far from her. Debbie sarcastically replied. Children. Mr. Thorne shook his head reproachfully. I love Mayim, and I want to marry her. Seriously. This? Martin wasn't pleasantly surprised. Martin, don't you dare. The man reprimanded his son. And what if I do? Will you disinherit me? If there's anything left to inherit by then, thanks to your new girlfriend, Martin said. Well, children, I thought you would be happy for me that I'm not alone again. Do you think it was easy for me all these 5 years? Mr. Thorne shook his head. We were always there for you, supporting you as best we could. Debbie argued. Yes, but you live your life with your work, always busy. Martin has Carol, who is always there for him. And I'm constantly alone. I didn't even want to go home to stay there in loneliness. At least at my clinic, I can interact with people. The man sighed tiredly. So where did you two meet? Martin asked. Mayim works as an administrator at my clinic. Mr. Thorne smiled. Mayim, who had been sitting silently, suddenly smiled. And he come, my children, she said, looking towards the entrance. Turning around, she saw a young woman holding the hand of a 10 to 12-year-old girl. 2 men followed them. Unexpectedly, Jerry was approaching her table. Debbie and Martin looked at their father with puzzled expressions. What the heck were these kids doing here? Dad, what's going on? If you haven't forgotten, we gathered here to discuss my wedding. Martin protested. Son, I just wanted to tell you and Debbie in a family setting that I proposed to Mayim. Mr. Thorne sighed. And Mayim suggested introducing you to her relatives. And did you ask if we needed this? The young man continued to express his outrage. What, you've decided to live with this? Martin stopped himself. Choose your words carefully when talking about my mother, the young man warned. Apparently, he was Mayim's son, and if not, Martin asked, squinting his eyes. Ross, please, not now, Mayim said. Quiet. Can you behave decently? Mr. Thorne ordered. And how am I behaving? You've ruined our celebration, Martin said. And how? The man genuinely puzzled. By bringing a bunch of strangers here. Martin shook his head. Brother, don't get so angry. Let's get to know each other better, Debbie said with a sweet smile. Although, in reality, she wanted to tell the new relatives everything and reveal the truth about their decent family. I'm Rose, introduced the young woman standing next to Jerry, Mayim's daughter. And this is my husband, Jerry. We're already acquainted with Jerry. Much closer than you think, Debbie said. Debbie, not more than with any other teachers. I was recently transferred to the school where Debbie works, blushed Jerry and looked intently at Debbie. He silently pleaded with her not to reveal anything about their relationship. Oh, don't be so modest, Jerry, waved the young woman. What's happening? Ross frowned and suspiciously looked at his sister's husband. I don't know, Jerry shrugged. Okay, I'm kidding. We're having a comedy night today. Did I get it right, Dad? Debbie smiled. Meaning? Mr. Fawn was confused. Well, you joked about your relationship with your administrator. The young woman squinted. No, I didn't joke. The man looked guiltily at his beloved woman. He was ashamed of his children's behavior. All right, everyone calm down. Let's have dinner instead. I came from work and am incredibly hungry. Debbie looked at those present. She decided to change tactics. She wanted to learn more about her lover's family. A sensible idea. Mr. Fawn gratefully smiled at his daughter. He thought Debbie accepted his choice. Well, no. Martin protested and stood up from the table. Following him, Carol, his fiancée, stood up. Please, sit down. Let's continue our celebration, Debbie requested, staring into her brother's eyes. Brother and sister knew each other well, and with just one look, they understood what the other needed. Martin smiled. He understood that his sister had come up with something. Okay, sis. As you say. Martin smiled sweetly. Knowing his sister's character, he was ready to endure the company of people he disliked. Debbie wouldn't ask him to stay for no reason. Mr. Fawn let out a relieved sigh. It seemed like his children understood everything. To get to know each other better, I suggest everyone share a bit about themselves, Debbie proposed, casting a sly look at Jerry. She was waiting for the right moment to reveal everything about Jerry's infidelity to Rose. As you've already guessed, my name is Ross. I work as a dentist. The young man smiled. Let me guess. You work as a dentist in my father's clinic, Martin said. Yes, Mr. Fawn was so kind to offer me a job as soon as I moved to the city. The thing is, I lived in a neighboring town until recently, and since I got divorced from my wife, I decided to change my place of residence and moved back to the hometown. The young man explained. What a kind and sweet person our Mr. Fawn is. But he didn't hire his own son in the clinic, saying he couldn't afford it. Martin smirked. I still think so. It's one thing to work with strangers, and another thing with your own child. Mistakes made by others are perceived less painfully than those made by your own child. The man said. So you are saying that I'm such a terrible therapist that you are constantly ashamed of me? Martin protested. Martin, that's not what I meant. The father tried to justify himself. Rose, tell me, do you happen to work in your father's clinic? Martin asked, smiling pleasantly. No, I'm a homemaker, but your dad offered me a job. The young woman replied. Seriously? So, neither I nor Carol, who is a first-class nurse, our dear daddy didn't want to hire, but he gladly accepted other people's children into his clinic. Martin exclaimed, throwing his hands up. Martin, you know very well why I didn't hire Carol. She had just enrolled in medical school to become a pediatrician, and it would have been challenging for her to juggle work and studies. It could have led to her dropping out of school. Mr. Fawn explained. Are you implying that my fiancée is so stupid that she couldn't handle doing two things at once? Martin asked. He recalled that challenging moment in their lives when they urgently needed money to make ends meet. They were grabbing any job they could find. Martin was an aspiring therapist, and Carol was a medical school student. Rose, why do you stay at home? Debbie asked. Well, it's been like that since the first day of my marriage. Jerry likes to come home and see the apartment tidy, have a hot and delicious dinner ready, and our daughter's homework done. Rose shrugged. So, you stay home all day? The young woman clarified, smirking. Why stay? I'm constantly doing something. Cleaning windows, organizing things in the bedroom, doing a thorough cleaning. Rose replied. Do you find time for yourself? Debbie asked. Unfortunately, no. Rose shook her head. It's quite noticeable. You've let yourself go. Rose, unlike you, your husband takes care of himself. He has a modern suit and a well-maintained figure. Debbie said in a sweet tone. Jerry needs to look presentable. He's the school director. Rose looked at her husband. Aren't you afraid that your husband will find another favorite woman? Someone more well-groomed and sexy? Debbie persisted. I don't quite understand what you're talking about. Did all the brain-cleaning chemicals eat away at your brain? Debbie asked sarcastically. Shut your mouth, Jerry shouted. The onlookers turned their gaze to the angry man. His eyes shot lightning bolts. It was clear from his demeanor that he was ready to tear into Debbie if she opened her mouth again. Debbie, I ask you to be quiet. I'm sorry, dear. It's just been a tough day. He looked at his wife with an apologetic gaze. I understand. Rose smiled. She knew how difficult it was for her husband after the transition from his previous job. One teacher falsely accused him of harassment simply because Jerry didn't bow to her wishes and fired her. Parents complained about the teacher mistreating their children. Jerry spoke with her several times, advised her to change her approach, but the teacher didn't heed the director's words, considering herself in the right. In the end, Jerry gave her the option to resign voluntarily, or he would fire her. That's when the teacher accused him of harassment. The entire teaching staff sided with Jerry, and that was the only thing that prevented him from being fired. Jerry smiled and, taking his wife's hand, kissed her. Debbie watched the affection between her lover and his wife. It infuriated her that Jerry had been lying to her all this time, shamelessly and brazenly. He had a great relationship with his wife, even though Jerry had claimed everything was bad, and she believed him. Debbie felt disgusted. She wanted to get out onto the street to breathe some fresh air. Martin, I'll go. Sorry it all turned out this way, Debbie said, looking at her brother. Sis, you are not at fault for anything. Martin looked at Mayhem with disdain. He saw her as the reason for the spoiled evening. If this woman hadn't entered their father's life, everything would be normal now. Dad, see you, Mr. Fawn stood up from the table to hug Debbie, but she pretended not to notice. Instead, quickly getting up from the table and smiling, Debbie went outside. She decided to call her friend and talk to her. Kyla, hi, hey. What happened? Kyla asked. This isn't a phone conversation, Debbie replied. She walked down the street, wiping away tears. Can you come over to my place? Kyla asked. The woman understood that something had happened to her friend. Yes, Debbie said. 30 minutes later, she was sitting in her friend's kitchen, crying loudly. Imagine, Jerry acted like he was seeing me for the first time. She sobbed loudly, speaking. And what, in your opinion, should he have done? Hug you? Confess to his wife that he's been cheating on her for 2 months. Kyla said wearily. Why not? Or do you want to say that I don't deserve that? Debbie asked. Debbie, you deserve to be loved and to love, like all other women. But you know very well that you can't build your happiness on someone else's misfortune. Especially since Jerry didn't promise you anything. Kyla sighed. So you were saying it's my fault? That I dragged him into bed myself? Debbie squinted, wiping away tears. In a way, yes. Kyla nodded. Well, I thought we were friends. And you? Debbie got angry. She stood up from the table. Debbie, we are friends. That's why I feel I have the right to tell you the truth. Kyla tried to justify herself. Shove your truth where you know, Debbie snapped angrily. She quickly got dressed and left Kayla's apartment, slamming the door loudly. Debbie left her friend's house angry. Some friend she turned out to be. Instead of support, she scolded her. Unexpectedly, Debbie abruptly stopped as she remembered leaving her phone on Kayla's table. At that moment, someone bumped into her. What kind of day is this? The second time today. Cursed the man. Can't you watch where you're going? Debbie angrily said, looking at the person who bumped into her. It's you again. The woman was unpleasantly surprised, seeing the same man with whom she had a minor altercation earlier. Good Lord. Tell me, is this your entertainment? The stranger asked with displeasure, glancing at Debbie. What do you mean? The woman faltered. What on earth is this scoundrel, who seems to hate women, talking about? Walking down the street just to stop abruptly in front of someone. Why would I need that? Debbie frowned. I don't know. You tell me. The stranger shrugged. Maybe you're getting acquainted with men, luring them into your nets, and then, like a female praying mantis after a night of love, taking their strength for yourself. What nonsense are you talking? Debbie was taken aback. Just need some explanation for why you suddenly stopped in front of me. The man explained. And this happened in different parts of the city. Or maybe you are following me. The stranger suddenly squinted his eyes. Do I have nothing else to do? Debbie got angry. She walked around the stranger and headed to her friend's place for the phone. I hope our meeting was the last. The man called after her, and I'm sure it was. Debbie replied. Debbie came home late in the evening. The mood was completely ruined. She had a quarrel with her friend. Her relationship with her lover was ruined. Moreover, tomorrow, Finn Coleman's father, her student, coming. They said the man had a tough character, as he worked in the military. The next morning, Debbie was in the teacher's lounge, preparing for classes. Today, she had to handle classes for the 6th grade, where Finn studied. He was a good boy, just lagging behind in terms of studies. The thing was, he had recently transferred from another city because his father was in the military and frequently changed duty stations. The boy couldn't get used to one school before moving to another city and another school. Debbie sighed. Looking at the clock, only 5 minutes left until the first lesson. She grabbed the notebooks and headed towards the exit. At that moment, Kyla entered the teacher's lounge. Debbie, hi. She smiled. She looked at her friend with a guilty look. It was shameful for her about yesterday. Debbie walked past Kyla, not even looking at her. She was hurt that her friend didn't support her. Debbie, Jerry asked you to come. Kyla called after the woman, hearing the name of her now possibly former lover. Debbie didn't stop. She understood why he was calling her. But she wasn't a schoolgirl to run to the principal at the first order when she did something wrong. The bell rang. Debbie started her lesson. Regardless of what others said about her, she loved her job. She cared deeply about her subject, which she had loved since childhood. She always rejoiced in her students' successes and felt upset if they didn't understand something. Time flew by imperceptibly. Returning to the teacher's lounge after classes, Debbie sighed. Glancing at the clock, she realized she still had half an hour before meeting Finn's father. All right, I'll get ready for tomorrow. The woman thought and headed to her office. She turned on the computer when an unexpected knock sounded at the door. Come in, Debbie called out. Hello. She heard a soft female voice. Looking at the visitor, Debbie was stunned. Before her stood Rose, Jerry's wife. Hello. What are you doing here? Debbie answered, surprised. Debbie, I urgently need to talk to you, Rose said. It was clear from her expression that Rose was about to reveal something important. I'm listening. Debbie tried to keep herself composed. Debbie, I'm asking you to make sure my husband doesn't find out the true reason for our conversation, Jerry's wife requested. Then you chose the wrong place. If you haven't forgotten, your husband works here as the director. They will report your presence to him immediately. Debbie smirked. I said I want to talk about our parents' relationship. The woman sighed. Debbie noticed that her skin was unusually pale. Rose, are you okay? Debbie frowned. Everything is fine. Just a little stuffy. Rose waved her hand. What did you want to talk about? Debbie shrugged. About my husband. Yesterday, you hinted that Jerry got involved with someone from your school, Rose said. She looked at Debbie. Seriously? I don't remember anything like that, sighed the math teacher. Debbie, please, tell me the truth. It's not too late yet, Rose said. Too late for what? Debbie frowned. The thing is, I'm pregnant. Already 12 weeks, she announced. Is that 3 months? The math teacher clarified. Yes. Jerry and I have been dreaming for years of having a son. Rose nodded. Oh. Debbie sighed. It turns out Jerry's wife was pregnant for a whole month when that scoundrel started an affair with Debbie. What a scoundrel. And what to do now? Debbie, Now you understand how important it is for me to know if my husband has a lover, Rose said in a quiet tone. Rose, calm down. Your husband has no one. Debbie tried to reassure the woman. But you said something yesterday, Rose began. But Debbie abruptly interrupted her. I was angry about yesterday's situation. I decided to upset your family, the math teacher said firmly. Are you not deceiving me? Aren't you afraid? You can tell me the truth, Rose asked. Rose, you can trust me. I told you the truth. At that moment, an angry Jerry burst into the office. He cast a hateful glance at Debbie. Get away from my wife, he ordered. Jerry, calm down, Debbie pleaded. Darling, don't believe this woman. Nothing happened between us. I love only you. Jerry approached his wife and took her hand. What are you talking about? Rose exclaimed, looking at her husband with bewilderment. That's what I'm talking about. I told your wife right away that you didn't have any romantic involvement with anyone at our school. Debbie smirked. She understood that Jerry had just exposed himself. Jerry, what does all this mean? Rose asked. She looked at her husband, waiting for an answer. We're both waiting. Debbie continued to taunt. When they told me you were at the school and went to see Debbie, I imagined all sorts of things. And when I walked into the office and heard the last words, I thought Debbie was telling you that we had an affair. Jerry began to justify himself. He tried to speak confidently to make his wife believe him. Oh, how interesting it is here. And these people have complaints against my son, a male voice echoed. The attendees turned to the man standing in the doorway. Debbie frowned. Before her stood the man who had bumped into her twice yesterday. Do you want something? Jerry quickly regained composure. No, but the math teacher has some issues with my son, the stranger replied. Are you Finn Coleman's father? Debbie asked. Yes, I'm Alex Coleman. The man introduced himself. And which one of you is Debbie? The stranger looked at the women present. It's me. Debbie introduced herself. Come in. She pointed to the desk next to hers. Then she looked at the principal. Jerry, could you and your wife leave the room together and pay more attention to her so that nonsense doesn't get into her head, especially in her condition? Absolutely, the principal promised. He took his wife by the hand and led her out of the office. Rose was in turmoil. On the one hand, her husband spoke very convincingly. On the other hand, something was bothering her. And what exactly Rose couldn't figure out. Debbie sat down at the table and sighed. Now she had to talk to this unpleasant man. Alex, I would like to talk about your son, Debbie began. And what do you want to tell me about Finn that I don't know? The man smirked. Your son is a capable boy. He just needs a bit of help. Debbie looked at Alex, starting with memorizing the multiplication table. All right. What else should I do? Alex nodded. Tell me, would you mind if I leave Finn for extra lessons after school? The woman asked. And is there no other way? The man frowned. No. Debbie sighed. I understand that considering the life Finn has been living lately. What life? Alex interrupted the teacher. As far as I know, you often changed your place of service, moving from city to city. So Finn had to adapt to both teachers and classmates. While this was happening, the boy simply might not have grasped the necessary material. As a result, he missed many key moments. I see. How often do you want to leave Finn after school? The man asked. Maximum for an hour or two. The woman shrugged. No, that won't work, Alex said. Why? Debbie asked, puzzled. The thing is, Finn has boxing classes after school. Do you think some boxing is more important than math? The woman was surprised. Finn is a future man, and when the time comes to stand up for himself, your math is unlikely to help him, Alex retorted. And what should I do? Debbie sighed. She realized that, on the one hand, Alex was right, and on the other hand, how to convince the man that neglecting math is not the solution. Will an hour be enough for you? Alex asked. I'll try. It's better than nothing. The woman nodded. Any more questions? The man looked intently at the math teacher. No. Debbie smiled. Unless I'm listening carefully. Alex didn't take his eyes off the woman. Don't get me wrong. But Finn always looks clean and neat. Debbie carefully chose her words. But it's evident that he lacks a woman's car. Is it that noticeable? The man tensed. No. Just. Many boys nowadays grow their hair out. But Finn always has a short haircut. And your son's clothes seem like they were bought randomly. Whatever was available. Do you understand? The woman sighed. It seems so. The thing is, Finn's mom doesn't live with us. Alex said. Why? Debbie asked. She got tired of moving with me to different military bases. And at some point, she just left. The man shrugged. Where did she go? How can someone leave their own child? Abandoning him to a military father. The woman frowned. To another man. For a better life. She left Finn with me, saying he was not needed by her new husband. Alex sighed. Well, I've worked in schools for many years, but I've never heard such stories. Any more questions? The man looked at his watch. He was running late for work. No. Excuse me. The woman shook her head. For what? Alex asked. For talking so much. The woman felt ashamed of her behavior. It happens. Goodbye. The man waved his hand. Goodbye. Debbie repeated. After Alex left, Debbie pondered. How could someone abandon their child? Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. Hello. The woman answered. Sis. Hi. Martin greeted. From his voice, Debbie could tell that her brother was deeply upset. Hi. What happened? The woman replied. Can you come to our cafe in half an hour? Martin asked. Yes. Debbie nodded. I'll be waiting for you. The man said and ended the call. Rising from the table, the woman began to get ready to meet her brother. But another phone call distracted her. Hello. Debbie answered. Hello. Dear. Mr. Thorne greeted. Hi. The woman sighed. After last night, Debbie didn't want to talk to her father. Dear, I urgently need to talk to you. The man said. Today is not possible. Let's meet tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Debbie replied. No. It has to be today. Mr. Thorne said firmly. I told you. I have things to do today. The woman objected. It seems that I'm only needed for the sake of money. And when you realized that the inheritance would be incomplete, you decided to abandon me. Mr. Thorne got angry. Dad, do you hear yourself? What money do I need from you? I live on my salary in a rented apartment. I've never asked you for money. And today I really have things to do, so I can't meet with you. She responded. Sorry, Mr. Thorne said. But Debbie didn't hear it. She turned off the phone and went to meet her brother. Debbie hurried to meet her brother. She wanted to tell him about the conversation with her father. At the same time, Alex's thoughts were still on her mind. Despite his masculinity and strictness, there was something about him that made Debbie think about him. Arriving at the cafe, she immediately saw her brother, who was sitting by the window, drinking his favorite tall grey tea. Ordering a caramel sea salt latte for herself, the woman headed to the table. Martin. Hi. Debbie smiled, approaching her brother. How are you? Why are you alone? Hi. Martin stood up from the table and hugged his sister tightly. Carol will join us a bit later. I would like to talk to you alone. What happened? Debbie frowned. Does your fiancé have secrets? The thing is, the wedding is cancelled. The man sighed. Cancelled? Did you change your mind about marrying Carol? She was surprised. Are you out of your mind? The wedding will happen. Just modest. Without much fuss. Martin wearily looked at his sister. Why? Debbie asked. She absolutely did not understand what was happening. When Carol and I were planning the wedding, Dad persuaded us to abandon a modest wedding, promising to take on a significant part of the expenses. I didn't like this idea from the beginning, but I agreed for Carol's sake. After all, What girl doesn't dream of being a princess at her wedding? A white dress, a gorgeous tiara, yes, and a prince. Debbie smiled. Exactly. Only the prince turned out to be a pauper, unable to fulfill his bride's wishes in real life. Martin chuckled. But the prince has a king father who will pay for all of this. At least, he promised. The woman reminded. The thing is, today I met with Dad, and he refused to pay for our wedding. Why did Dad refuse to pay for the wedding? It was his initiative after all. He said that since I behaved so rudely with his bride and her family, I can forget about paternal assistance. The man said with a mocking tone, "This is your wedding," which he insisted on. Debbie got angry. "Dad called me today. What did he want?" Martin asked. "To talk. But I was in a hurry to see you, and I refused him. Then he accused me of communicating with him only for the sake of inheritance." The woman shrugged. "Oh God, he's so annoying with his money." The man whispered. "Doesn't he understand that human relationships come first in this world?" "Apparently not." Debbie sighed. At that moment, Carol entered the cafe. "Debbie." "Hi." She greeted. "Hi." Debbie smiled. "Guys, I saw such a dress today." Carol said, "It's just a dream. I will be the most beautiful in it." "Carol, we need to talk seriously." Martin was determined. Undoubtedly, he could organize a luxurious wedding for his beloved, but at the cost of getting into significant debt. Martin didn't understand such foolishness. "I'm listening attentively." Carol looked at her fiancé. "My beloved, you have two choices. We get married on the planned date, but our wedding will be very modest because we are paying for it ourselves. Or we save up for a luxurious celebration, but we get married in a few years. Choose." Martin took the woman's hands. "But your dad." "Dad refused to pay because we didn't accept Mayhem and her family." Martin explained. "What do you want?" Carol asked. "Carol, my dear, I gave you the right to choose because I don't care how we celebrate our wedding. The most important thing is that you will be my wife." Martin kissed the bride on the cheek. "Then we return to the original plan. We will have a modest wedding." Carol smiled. "Thank you." A lump formed in the man's throat. It was important for him that the bride understood and supported him. "I want us to be husband and wife, and the rest doesn't matter." The woman caressed the groom's cheek. "Oh God, you are so sweet." Debbie was happy for her brother. The lovers glanced at Debbie and smiled in response. "Will you invite me to the wedding?" The woman asked. "Of course, from my side. You're the only person close to me." Martin's face instantly turned serious. "Martin, maybe you'll invite your father," Debbie suggested. "No, Debbie, there's no turning back. Besides, my father himself said it. Either I invite him along with Mayhem, or he won't set foot at our wedding." Martin shook his head. "I understand." Debbie sighed. Why did her father act this way? He perfectly understood that Mayhem became a sudden reality for both her and Martin, even if they behaved like spoiled children. Why didn't Mr. Thorne warn them about his new relationship? Lost in thought, Debbie was interrupted by a child's laughter. Turning to the source of the sound, she was astonished. Sitting at the neighboring table was the Coleman family. Debbie had never seen Finn so happy. He was chatting with his father, laughing. It seemed that there were no happier people in the world than father and son. They had their circle, and outsiders were not allowed. Suddenly, Debbie realized that she would like to be a part of that circle, to be as happy with Finn and Alex. The next morning, Debbie arrived at work early. Entering her office, she saw Jerry waiting for her. "What do you want?" she asked in an annoyed tone. "Debbie, are you angry with me?" Jerry asked in a gentle tone, approaching the woman. "I understand you perfectly. I would scold myself too. But you have to understand, I can't divorce Rose right now. You know she's pregnant. What do you want from me?" Debbie stared at the man intently. "We were good together." Jerry tried to hug the woman, but Debbie didn't allow it. "So you are suggesting I stay your mistress? Have you considered that I want to be loved and love in return?" I want to walk with my man without hiding. I want to wake up with him in the same bed every morning. But you were fine with that before, Jerry said. Because I was foolish, Debbie admitted, and now you've become wiser. The man smirked. As you can see, Debbie shrugged. Jerry, let's end our relationship on this note. Especially if my father is going to marry your mother-in-law. We'll have to see each other sometimes. And I don't want to pretend that you're just my boss. One thing doesn't interfere with the other. And remember, our relationship, as you put it, will only end when I want it to. Jerry replied. Are you sure? Or do you think I won't be able to stand up for myself? Debbie frowned. Someone tried, and it didn't work out for her. Jerry smirked maliciously. You mean the one you accused of harassment? Debbie clarified. How do you know? He squinted. Your wife told me. The woman explained. He approached Debbie closely, looked her straight in the eyes, and said, our relationship continues, whether you like it or not. Aren't you afraid I'll tell your wife everything? Debbie asked, squinting her eyes. This situation was getting on her nerves. She won't believe you. Rose thinks you're a bit envious and vindictive. Jerry smirked. Why? Debbie asked. Because you were lonely and angry with your father for his relationship with Mayhem. The man explained. Then why did she come to me? Debbie wondered. I don't know. Jerry shrugged. Okay, the bell will ring soon. I'm going to my office. But after classes, I'll be waiting for you in my office. I have things to do. Besides, I already told you I'm not involved with married men anymore. Too bad. The man sighed sadly. You could have built such a career. And now I'll have to say goodbye to you. Why is that? Debbie tensed. Did Jerry really decide to blackmail her? Well, you understand that there will be parents who will be unhappy with how you teach their children. And I will have to react. At first, it will be a verbal reprimand. Then a written one. And then, sorry, we'll have to part ways. The school principal smiled. Who is we? Debbie clarified. The school and all its teachers and students. Jerry explained. He ran his hand over her cheek. I'll be waiting after class. Get out. Debbie shouted. She wanted to punch him in the face and scratch him. Unfortunately, she couldn't afford that. When you're angry, you just turn me on even more. The man winked at Debbie and left the office. The woman sat at the table. How did she get into this mess? And what to do now? She will no longer be in a relationship with Jerry, that's for sure. The only question is, how to gracefully get rid of him. Debbie closed her eyes. God, how she wished all of this didn't exist. Neither Jerry, nor his wife, nor his mother-in-law. At that moment, Debbie heard a slight rustle. Opening her eyes, she saw the door of the cabinet containing teaching aids slowly opening. The woman went to the cabinet to close it. Suddenly, she saw something white crawling out of the cabinet. Closing her mouth with her hand to avoid screaming, Debbie slowly backed away. The monster crawled out of the cabinet and stood up. It was her student, Finn Coleman. Hello, Debbie, the student greeted. He looked at the teacher with frightened eyes. Hello, Finn, Debbie greeted quietly. Her throat was dry from the fear she had just experienced. What were you doing in the cabinet? The woman asked the student. Dad was called to work in the morning, and I had nothing to do. So I decided to come to school early. Coming into the classroom, I decided to see if I could get into the cabinet or not. Honestly, I've been thinking about it for a long time. Finn said, judging by the fact that you crawled out of the cabinet, you did a great job. Debbie sighed. Yes, as soon as I got into the cabinet, the school principal came. And then you. And what did you hear? Debbie blushed. Lord, if Finn tells anyone what he heard, she and Jerry will be in big trouble. Nothing. I tried to sit quietly so you wouldn't notice me. Finn sighed. Thank God. The woman breathed out. But I filmed everything on video. Do you want me to show it to you? The boy said. Finn, let's do this. You transfer this video to me, and then delete it from your phone. Debbie quickly devised a plan. Why? Finn asked. That's how it needs to be. You see, Jerry doesn't like being filmed. Finding out about it, he starts swearing a lot. He can even call your dad. No need to call my dad to school. The student was frightened, and I need this video to make a congratulatory film about Jerry. Let's agree like this. You won't tell anyone that you were sitting in the cabinet and filming the video. Debbie said, okay. Finn nodded. He was ready to promise anything just to avoid his father being called to school. Transferring the video to the teacher, Finn deleted it. Debbie smiled satisfactorily. Now she had evidence that Jerry was blackmailing her. She was glad that Finn turned out to be a naive and kind boy for his age. Left alone after classes, Debbie watched the video. Every word, every sigh of the speakers could be heard on it. The woman frowned. It turns out Finn heard everything. Then why did he lie? To avoid putting Debbie, his teacher, in an awkward position. Debbie, what are you doing? The unexpected voice of the math teacher made her jump. Turning around, she saw her friend, just watching a video. Debbie waved her hand. I came to you for a reason. Kyla paused. She took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts. Again came to scold me for being involved with a married man. I want to tell you in advance that I broke up with Jerry. I came to warn you. Jerry is planning to discredit you in the eyes of our fellow teachers. Kyla said. What do you mean? Debbie asked. Today, he called our deputy head, Mr. Tamala, to his office and asked to talk to the teachers. He wants us to tell them what complaints we have about you. He explained it to the deputy, saying that there have been complaints from parents that you teach their children incorrectly, don't provide proper knowledge, demand things they don't know, forcing them to hire a tutor, and the mandatory condition is that this person should be you. What nonsense. It has never happened. Besides, if I leave children after classes, I work with them absolutely for free. Moreover, I don't demand anything beyond the norm from the children. The woman objected. She closed her eyes. It seemed that Jerry had started to carry out his threats. Well, she would have to go all the way to defend her honor as a teacher. Yes, everyone would find out about her relationship with the principal, and possibly, due to her immoral behavior, she would lose her job. Kyla, remember you said you have an acquaintance working in the city's education department? Yes, my classmate Alice. Kyla nodded. Can you introduce me to her? The woman asked hopefully. Why? Kyla asked. She stared at her friend to figure out what to do next. Debbie handed the phone and showed the video taken by Finn. Kyla watched the video attentively. With each passing second, her eyes widened more and more. She was shocked by what she saw. Emotions overwhelmed her. What a scoundrel. The woman cursed. So, if you refused him, he decided to get revenge on you. Eck, he's just a disgrace. Now you understand why I need the help of your friend. Debbie asked. Yes. Okay, I'll call her now, and we'll figure everything out. While the woman was talking to her friend, Debbie pondered the complex situation. First, she needed to find the woman who was fired because of the harassment by Jerry. Now she understood that she was just another victim of the brazen principal who sought revenge on the woman who rejected him. Then she decided to talk to her father to tell him the truth. However, in the current situation, it's still unclear how her father will react. The only thing clear is that at first, he will shout at her. After all, Mr. Thorne raised his daughter from childhood to be honest and prudent. Debbie hoped that her father would help her. Debbie, I talked to Alice. She's waiting for us in her office in half an hour. Kyla said a couple of minutes later. Let's go, decisively said Debbie. She grabbed her bag and headed towards the exit. Wait for me downstairs, Kyla asked. I'll just grab my bag from my office. Debbie slowly descended. Suddenly, Jerry appeared from around the corner. Debbie, are you already going home? Squinting, the director asked. He closely observed the woman's reaction. Yes, A lot of housework has accumulated over the past 2 months. Debbie smiled sweetly. She decided not to show her true feelings to Jerry for now, to lull his vigilance. Let him think he won. And why didn't you do them? Jerry didn't take his eyes off the woman. When Debbie was with him, doing everything to make him leave his wife, she became unnecessary to Jerry. And now, when Debbie showed her character and refused to continue their relationship, Jerry's feelings for her resurfaced. How he wanted to possess this unteachable woman. There was a lot of work at the office. The woman shrugged. Maybe today you'll stay a bit longer, Jerry asked playfully. He already imagined how they would be alone in his office. I don't feel like it. Debbie shook her head negatively. What if you think about it? Jerry asked, squinting. From his facial expression, Debbie understood that he was angry with her refusal. Debbie, let's go. I'm ready. Kyla suddenly appeared. Jerry, goodbye. Goodbye, the man said discontentedly. Kyla took her friend by the arm and led her to the exit. What a scoundrel, Kyla exclaimed when the women got into her car. You're refusing him directly. That's why we need to stop him. Debbie smiled. Half an hour later, the women were sitting in the office of the Department of Education specialist. So, what happened to you? Alice asked, looking at her friends. Debbie told everything in detail. She decided to be completely honest with Alice, not to put her in a difficult position with the management. And now Debbie is telling him directly to break up. But he decided to revenge her. Kyla said, I would have never thought of him as such a scoundrel. Honestly, Jerry never caused any negative emotions in us. Alice was surprised. We all defended him after that harassment incident at his previous job. Alice, can you tell me the name of that teacher? Debbie asked. Why? She wondered. I want to talk to her. I think she is a victim of Jerry's abuse. Debbie explained. Okay, I'll find out now. Alice began searching for the necessary information on the computer. So, Ashley Kane. The woman took a sheet and started writing down the information. Here's the last name, first name, and address. Alice handed the sheet to Debbie. Just please don't say that you got this information from me, okay? Kyla, let's go to Ashley. Debbie asked. Let's go. Kyla was determined. Girls, keep me updated. After the visit to Ashley, let me know what you find out. Then we'll think about what to do next. Alice requested. Sure, see you, Kyla said. Debbie got into the car with her friend. Suddenly, she realized that there might be several people like her and Ashley Kane. If that's the case, it's necessary to stop Jerry. Debbie understood that the police doesn't usually get involved in such matters. In that case, something else will have to be devised. The friends arrived at the home where Ashley Kane, an unjust victim of Jerry, lived. So, it seems to be here, Kyla said, looking at the address Alice had written on the sheet. Shall we? She looked at Debbie. What if she refuses to help us? Debbie unexpectedly became scared for herself. I don't recognize you, my friend. What happened to you all of a sudden? Earlier, you went straight through, sweeping away all obstacles in your path. And now you're scared, Kyla said. I really don't know, Debbie admitted. Debbie sighed heavily. Unexpectedly for herself, she realized what kind of situation she got into because of her foolish desire to get married. If Debbie sincerely wanted to love and be loved, to be a wife and mother, that's one thing. But she specifically wanted to get married, and preferably to a wealthy man. That's the quality Debbie saw in Jerry. And it didn't matter that he was married. Let's go. After talking to Ashley, we'll decide what to do next. Kyla took her friend by the hand. You're right. Debbie was grateful to her friend for the support. Without her, she wouldn't have known what to do. The women approached the apartment where Ashley lived, and Kyla confidently pressed the doorbell. After a couple of minutes, the door opened, revealing a young and beautiful woman. Hello, who are you looking for? The apartment owner asked, casting a curious glance at the guests. She affectionately caressed her slightly rounded belly. "We're looking for Ashley Kane," Kyla said. "Dear, who is it?" A male voice came from deep within the apartment. "Max, it's for me," Ashley replied without taking her eyes off the guests. She carefully observed her friends. "What do you want?" "We're here about Jerry, man," Debbie said. "Goodbye." The apartment owner started to close the door. Ashley's expression abruptly changed. There was no trace of her previous friendliness. However, Kyla didn't allow the door to close, using her foot as an obstacle. "Ashley, please, talk to us," Kyla pleaded. "It's very important. I almost lost my fiancé because of this scoundrel," Ashley angrily said. "And I was shamefully fired from my job. Now the same fate awaits my friend," Kyla persisted. "Fine," reluctantly agreed the apartment owner. "Come in." The friends entered the apartment. Ashley led them to a spacious room. "Have a seat," the woman invited. At that moment, a young man entered the room. "Hello." The apartment owner curiously looked at the guests. "These women came about Jerry, man," Ashley said. She sat in an armchair. The man immediately approached and carefully placed a small pillow behind her back. "One of them is in the same situation as I am. Why won't he just calm down?" The man angrily said. "Ashley, you talked me out of it back then. We should have taken it to the end." "Max, we would have just wasted our nerves," Ashley sighed. "But that scoundrel would have gotten what he deserved," the man said. "That's why we came to you." Debbie looked at Ashley. "I suggest we unite to stop Jerry. I'm out." The apartment owner raised her hands. "I have no evidence that this scumbag clung to me. Everyone believed him, not me. Honestly, I don't want to find myself in that mess again. But we can't do it without you," Debbie said despairingly. "Girls, please, why are you torturing me?" Ashley sighed heavily. "Understand, firstly, I'm expecting a child. And secondly, after those accusations, I almost went insane. Just imagine, I lived, worked at my dream job, prepared for a wedding with the most wonderful man in the world, enjoying life. And suddenly, Jerry started having feelings for me. At first, I tried to explain to him that I didn't need him as a man, especially since I was getting married soon. To which he replied that he wasn't proposing to marry me but suggesting a little entertainment." Max sighed. It was unpleasant for him to hear those words. Although he knew the whole story perfectly well, hearing it again was a trial. The man sat on a chair next to his wife and took her hand. "Of course, I refused," Ashley continued. "Then he started threatening me, saying that if I didn't become his lover, he would disgracefully kick me out of school." "You should have left school back then," Max said. "Who knew it would end like this?" The woman sadly smiled. "Jerry organized a powerful smear campaign against me. The school parent committee, under the leadership of that scoundrel, wrote letters to the education department asking to dismiss the immoral teacher. I couldn't work through the school peacefully. Someone always shouted offensive words at me. Knowing the whole situation, I almost broke his neck," Max continued. "I kept an eye on him near the school, but he seemed to sense that he was being watched and always left through the emergency exit. Too bad you stopped me." The man looked at his wife. "I didn't want you to end up in jail," Ashley sighed, "because that scoundrel would have surely filed a police report against you. I'm incredibly grateful to Max for supporting me. If even my loved one had abandoned me, I would have gone crazy. Thanks to my husband's support, I was able to start a new life. That's why we came to you for help," Debbie said. "Sorry, but I can't help you with anything," Ashley shrugged. "I don't want to see that scumbag again, especially since I'm expecting a child, and I don't want any danger to threaten him." "We understand," Kyla sighed sadly. "I'm sorry to have bothered you." Debbie stood up. "Ashley, here are our phone numbers." Kyla handed a sheet with the numbers. "If you happen to change your mind, give us a call." "Unlikely," Ashley shrugged. Kyla placed the sheet on the table. The friends, bidding them farewell, went outside. "What are we going to do next?" Kyla asked, looking at Debbie. I'll go to my father. The woman answered thoughtfully. I want to talk to him. Do you think it will work? Kyla asked doubtfully. I don't know. Debbie admitted. She hoped that her father would understand and help her. If her father rejected her, Debbie didn't know what to do. Debbie went up to the floor where her father lived. Holding the keys to the apartment, she pondered. She knew he lived with his woman, and Debbie wasn't sure if she had the moral right to open the door with her key. Deciding not to violate personal space, she tucked the keys into her bag and pressed the doorbell. Who's there? Mayem's voice was heard. It's Debbie, Mr. Fon's daughter. Is Dad home? The door opened, and Mayem looked at the guest. Hello, the woman said, opening the door wider to let Debbie in. Come in, thank you. The guest was grateful to Mr. Fon's beloved woman. Come into the study, Mayem said. The woman knocked on the door of the man's office. Dear, you have guests, she said, entering the room. Who? The office owner asked with interest. It's me, Debbie said. She looked at Mr. Fon. Debbie, what are you doing here? The man was surprised. I want to talk to you. It's very serious, and I need your help. She sighed. Something happened. Mr. Fon squinted. Knowing his daughter well, she wouldn't ask for help without a reason. I'm listening. Mayem, don't be offended, but this is a confidential conversation. Debbie looked at her father's companion. Could you leave us alone? I have no secrets from my Mayem. The man said in an offended tone. Dear, it's okay, Mayem said, understanding the situation. I'll go prepare dinner. I hope you'll stay with us. She looked at the guest. Thank you. Debbie was embarrassed. She felt ashamed of her behavior on the evening when Martin gathered the family to discuss the wedding. Mayem left the office, quietly closing the door behind her. I'm listening to you. Mr. Fon was angry. He didn't like that his daughter refused to talk in front of his beloved woman. Dad, I need your help. Debbie sighed heavily. I don't even know how to start. Debbie, start explaining something already. The man said irritably. Dad, it's not easy for me, and you're pressuring me. The woman said. I'm sorry. Mr. Fon's heart trembled. After all, no matter what, this woman who considered herself an adult was his daughter, in need of help. He stood up and approached Debbie. Forgive me. Lately, we've grown distant from each other. It happened this way. Debbie sighed sadly. Dad, I'll tell you everything now. Just promise you won't scold me. I promise. I hope you didn't rob a bank. The man took his daughter's hand. No. Tears welled up in the woman's eyes. How she missed these moments. Dad, it happened that I had a romance with a married Manuel. Debbie. Mr. Fon looked at his daughter with disapproval. We've discussed this so many times. You know that men like that never leave their families, so they won't promise anything to their mistresses. I know. Dad. Debbie stood up from her chair, agitated, and began pacing around the office. I don't know what came over me back then. I'm already 32, and I desperately want my family. Even my younger brother decided to get married. And when I met this man, I decided to break all the rules. I didn't care about his family, wife, or child. Oh, daughter. How did it come to this? The man shook his head disapprovingly. I don't know. I just didn't think about others back then. My life, my desires were all that mattered to me. And now it has all turned against me. The woman confessed. In what way? The man tensed. I decided to end things with him. But he doesn't agree. What do you mean? He doesn't agree. Mr. Fon asked. He said that if I don't continue the relationship with him, I'll be expelled from school for immoral behavior. The woman sighed. On one hand, they would be right. Next time, you should think about who you get involved with. The man said. Dad, don't start. He has already started organizing harassment against me. Debbie pleaded. Try calling his wife. Mr. Fon suggested. I can't. His wife is pregnant. The woman shrugged. Debbie, Seriously? Not only did you get involved with a married man because of your ambitions, but his wife is pregnant. The man raised his voice again. I didn't know she was pregnant. When I found out, it only strengthened my resolve to break up with him. The woman responded, Daughter, you simply amaze me. Is this how we raised you with your mother? Mr. Fawn continued, Dad, I came to ask for help, not to listen to reprimands. The woman was desperate. Who is he? Unexpectedly asked Mr. Fawn. Promise you won't get angry. Debbie requested. Who is he? The man raised his voice again. Jerry. The woman replied with a deep sigh. Mayim's son-in-law. Mr. Fun's surprise was so immense that he simply lost control of himself. Have you completely lost your mind? Or are there no men left in the world except for Jerry? And how am I supposed to live with this now? How do I look Mayim in the eyes with love? Debbie shuddered unexpectedly. Looking around, she saw Mayim standing in the doorway. Debbie frowned. Could it be that Mayim overheard their conversation with her father? And what to do now? What if she starts defending her son-in-law? It will only make the situation worse, and the relationship with her father will become even more strained. Mayim, let me explain everything to you now. Debbie sighed nervously. Since Mayim, Jerry's mother-in-law, had heard about his infidelity, Debbie decided to tell her everything as it really was. Debbie, don't involve Mayim in this, Mr. Fawn said. She doesn't need to know about this mess. Dear, it so happened that I heard something. No, I wasn't eavesdropping. Mayim looked at Debbie. You and your dad were just talking loudly. And the walls in this apartment are thin. Yeah. Debbie smiled. So, I know the reason for your visit to your father. Debbie, Rose hides a lot from me because she loves her husband very much. She knows perfectly well that if I find out something bad about him, it will end his career. That's why my daughter covers up his infidelities. What do you mean? Debbie was surprised. She looked at her father's beloved woman with incomprehension. What could Mayim do that would harm her son-in-law? The thing is, the father of my children works in the administration, and not just an ordinary person. Mayim explained. At first, he helped Jerry a lot, but Victor immediately warned Jerry that if he dared to harm Rose, Jerry would be in trouble. Victor is? Debbie asked. My ex-husband. Debbie, please tell me in detail about your relationship with Jerry. Why? I want to help you. Mayim smiled. I don't know. Mayim, I know that Rose is expecting a child. Debbie was confused. And what does that have to do with anything? If my daughter decides to stay with this scoundrel who has been cheating on her throughout their marriage, it will be Rose's choice, Mayim said. And you talk about it so calmly. Debbie was shocked by what she heard. There was no other way to put it. What am I supposed to do? Firstly, it's my daughter's choice. If she enjoys living deceived, what can I do? Rose doesn't listen to me. Secondly, Jerry's escapades are just rumors. There's no evidence of his infidelity. Jerry skillfully covered his tracks. His former lovers remained silent, fearing publicity, as they knew Jerry could easily ruin their lives and careers. Yeah, he's just a master at that. Debbie sighed. He only made one mistake with Ashley Kane. When she refused him, he disgraced her. And again, there was no evidence. Mayim said, I have a video where Jerry threatens me if I don't continue the relationship with him. He'll ruin my life. Debbie confessed. What a scoundrel. Mayim exclaimed. Debbie, delete that video immediately. Mr. Fawn ordered. Why? You yourself said that Rose is pregnant. This video could ruin her marriage. If I delete this video, it could ruin my career. I'll be fired in disgrace. Debbie objected. That will be your payment for being involved with a married man. Mr. Fawn shrugged. Dear, do you hear yourself? You're now blaming your daughter as if she's solely responsible for this. Jerry should also take responsibility for betraying his wife. Mayim said. Mayim, you know very well that men, by their nature, are polygamous. The apartment owner retorted, "So, are you saying that you will cheat on me too when we get married?" Mayim raised her eyebrows, asking, "I won't," Mr. Thorne firmly stated. "But in this world, if something is allowed for a man, a woman cannot afford it. Otherwise, everyone will consider her promiscuous." "Dad, are you serious? Do you want to say that I'm a hooker?" Debbie couldn't believe her ears. "Daughter, don't exaggerate my words. I just wanted to say that society views a man's infidelity as a given, while a woman cannot afford it. If that's how it is, then who will men cheat with?" Mayim asked. "If women watch their behavior, then men will stop cheating on their wives." Mr. Thorne shrugged. "You're right." Mayim agreed with the manual, and for now, we have what we have. "So, Debbie, I need that video." "Why?" the woman asked. "Do you want to keep your job and reputation?" Mayim asked. "Yes." Debbie nodded. "Then trust me." Mayim smiled. Debbie sent the video to Mayim's phone. The woman watched it several times. Emotions overwhelmed her. For so many years, this scoundrel had pretended to be an upright husband, arrogantly talking down to everyone below his status. Well, let's see what he'll say when her ex-husband, Victor, gets involved. Debbie returned home tired but satisfied. She immediately called her friend and shared how the meeting with her father went. "So Mayim turned out not to be so bad after all," Kyla said. "Yes, in fact, that's true," Debbie agreed. She had conflicting feelings towards her father's partner. Only now did the woman realize that her children's dislike of Mayim was her father's fault. If Mr. Thorne had warned that he would come to the meeting with the woman he intended to marry, everything would have gone differently. But it happened the way it did. And now nothing can be changed. Unexpectedly for herself, Debbie realized that she needed to talk to her brother and discuss the situation. He should be in the know. Although, on the other hand, Martin is currently not up for external problems. He is fully immersed in preparing for the wedding. All's well that ends well. Kyla smiled. She was glad that her friend managed to find help to get out of this situation she got herself into. "Well, it's only just beginning," Debbie sighed. The woman understood the potential consequences of her affair with Jerry. "The most important thing is that you remained a decent person in this situation," Kyla reassured her friend. "I hope so." Debbie yawned. Only now did she realize how deadly tired she was. "Okay, Kyla, I'm going to bed. Today was a very eventful day." "Thank you so much." "For what?" The woman sincerely wondered. "For support. Understanding." Tears welled up in Debbie's eyes. "And what are friends for? Or do you mean you could have abandoned me in a difficult moment?" Kyla asked. "No," Debbie replied confidently. "Well, there you go." Kyla smiled. "Okay, good night. See you tomorrow." Debbie sighed with relief. Thank goodness the situation turned in her favor. If Mayim keeps her word and hands the video to her ex-husband, Jerry won't get away with it. And he'll leave her alone. That means she can start a new, and most importantly, peaceful life. Debbie decided to calm down for now. Let everything unfold as it may. Sooner or later, she will meet the man with whom she'll be happy. The next morning, Debbie was in a great mood. Smiling, she walked into the teacher's room. "Hello," Debbie said, seeing one of the oldest teachers. "How are you feeling? Aren't you ashamed?" Helga, the biology teacher, pursed her lips in disapproval. The woman had been working at the school for over 45 years. "What happened?" Debbie asked. Although she perfectly understood the reason for Helga's dissatisfaction. "And you dare to ask?" The biology teacher blushed with indignation. "Yes, because I don't understand the reason for your outrage," Debbie replied. She decided that she would pretend not to know what was being talked about until the last moment. "You decided to slander an honorable man with an excellent family," Helga said. "Jerry, upon discovering your machinations, decided to have a civil conversation with you And you started to spread rumors about him. What did I say about him? Debbie asked. It seemed Jerry decided to pull the same trick as with Ashley. Only this time, he miscalculated. Debbie wouldn't back down and would fight to the end. Why did you start telling everyone that you had an affair with Jerry? Why did you unleash a wave of deceit on a decent person? The biology teacher asked. And how did you decide that it's a lie? Debbie squinted at Helga. Because an honorable and honest person like Jerry would never cheat on his wife. He is an honest family manual. Then why do you assume that I am spreading rumors about our supposed affair? Debbie asked. Jerry told me yesterday. Helga replied. If I were you, I would apologize to this honest man and resign from the school. Even better, people like you have no place near children. You need to change your field of work. You can't offer yourself to a married manual. How fortunate that you are not in my shoes. I decide for myself what to do next. Also, with whom and when to have affairs because I am still young. She immediately felt ashamed of her words. She knew that Helga was an old maid who sacrificed her personal happiness, choosing to work at the school. Her beloved man went to work in the distant and wild forest, where there were no schools or kindergartens. Helga refused to go with him. The man promised to return with money and marry Helga. She faithfully and patiently waited for her beloved. They wrote letters to each other for a long time. But at some point, the letters from the man stopped coming. Rumors reached Helga that her beloved had found someone else and got married. However, she believed and hoped that the man would return soon, and they would get married. Meanwhile, other men courted Helga, but she remained loyal to only one. 10 years later, he returned. Only this time, he had a wife and 2 children with him. Since then, Helga had devoted herself entirely to work, trying to drown the pain of betrayal, becoming a hardened person in the process. Debbie looked at Helga. Sorry. Debbie muttered and left the teacher's room. She felt ashamed of her words. After classes, Debbie decided to apologize to Helga. Debbie entered her classroom and started preparing for her lessons. Thank goodness she had her job, which distracted her from unnecessary thoughts. Debbie. A male voice interrupted her thoughts. We need to talk urgently. Startled, Debbie turned around to see Alex standing in the doorway. The man didn't expect his words to startle her. Debbie. I'm sorry, it's fine. Debbie waved her hand. What brings you to the school? Firstly, I wanted to thank you for my son. The man took out a box of chocolates and placed it on the table. Lately, my son felt unwanted. Teachers were just doing their job, and no one cared that Finn didn't understand mathematics, but you decided to help my son in your personal time. Not every teacher would do that nowadays. Your child is a capable student. It just happened that he fell behind in the material. But after a bit of individual tutoring with Finn, I can say that he learns quickly. Thank you. Alex sincerely thanked her. Actually, he came to talk not only about his son's success. He noticed that Finn had become very thoughtful lately. Finn, did something happen? Alex asked his son directly. Dad, you always said that if a woman is in trouble, she must be helped. The boy looked his father in the eyes. That's right. Alex nodded. You know that women are weak and need men's support. Do you want to help your classmate? Is someone bothering her? No, not a classmate. Finn shook his head. My teacher, Debbie. What happened to her? Is it something serious? Alex asked. He didn't understand why his son's words triggered such a reaction in him. But he wanted to shield this woman and keep her enemies away. Dad, our principal is harassing her. The boy took out his phone and showed a video to his father. I told Debbie that I didn't hear anything. You did the right thing. The man praised his son. Only to himself. He decided that he would become her protector. Now, Alex looked at Debbie and didn't know how to confess to her. Alex, did you want to say something else? Debbie asked. No. Alex was at a loss. It was the first time he felt this way. He always prided himself on the fact that his military training gave him many advantages. with courage being his foremost quality. And now he stood there like a boy. "Yes, I know about your relationship with the principal." He sighed deeply and said, "And do you judge me?" Debbie asked. Finn had indeed deceived her. It turns out he didn't delete the video and showed it to his father. Well, a child is still a child. No. In this case, I don't understand the principal. Well, I do understand him perfectly. I would fight tooth and nail for such a beauty like you, Alex. Debbie blushed. She appreciated the man's words. It's true. Debbie, I offer you my help. What kind? The woman was surprised. I understand that you don't have a man ready to stand up for you. I offer you my help, the man said. In what? Debbie squinted, looking closely at the manual. At that moment, Alex's car alarm went off. Damn, the alarm went off. The man looked at the key fob. Debbie, don't go anywhere. I'll be back soon. Alex quickly left the classroom. The woman smiled. And where should I go if I have a lesson in 20 minutes? Debbie looked after Alex. She sat back at her desk and looked at the computer screen. But Alex's words wouldn't leave her mind. What did he want to tell her? What help could he offer? Miss me? A male voice sounded unexpectedly. Debbie involuntarily frowned as she didn't expect to see Jerry. No. The woman shook her head. But I missed you. Jerry quickly approached the table. He abruptly took Debbie's hand, lifting her from the chair. You've been elusive lately, Jerry said, holding the woman tightly against him. He ran his hand down her back. Let me go, Debbie said. She was repulsed by his embrace. That just makes you more exciting, he whispered in her ear. If you don't let me go, I'll hit you, the woman threatened. And what will you do with your little fist? Jerry smiled. He perceived Debbie's resistance as a game from her side, trying to fuel his interest even more. My fiancé, nothing. But I can hurt you, a male voice sounded. Startled, Jerry quickly let go of Debbie. Hearing Alex's voice, the woman smiled. Your fiancé? Jerry asked, looking closely at Debbie. Yes, Jerry. Does that bother you? Debbie nodded. You became his fiancé too quickly, Jerry suspiciously said. You know, when two people really love each other, there's no point in waiting. Approaching the woman, Alex said. He stood next to Debbie, letting her know that he wouldn't let her be harmed. I fell in love with this beautiful woman from the first minute, so I decided not to waste time. I see, Jerry said thoughtfully. All right, Debbie, get ready for the lesson. Jerry quickly left the classroom. Debbie looked at the man. Alex, thank you so much. The woman kissed Alex on the cheek. You're welcome. He smiled. Until what time are you working today, and why do you need to know? Debbie asked. Why? The man looked at the teacher in surprise. For everyone, you are now my fiancé, so I have to pick you up, okay? You can pick me up at 3 in the afternoon. Debbie smiled. I'll be there, Alex promised and left the classroom. Debbie was happy. And even if it was just a game, what emotions it stirred. Oh, exactly at 3 o'clock, Debbie looked out the window and saw Alex standing near the school. The man held a large bouquet of flowers. Finn, your dad is here, Debbie informed the boy. He's here for you, Debbie. Finn smiled. Why for me? The woman looked at the student. I wonder what he'll say. Because you're the woman in trouble, Finn replied with a sigh. I see. Debbie was surprised. Shall we go? Debbie and the boy left the school. The woman noticed that Jerry was watching them from his office. She understood that he would never forgive her for this. And now her job at this school was at stake. Perhaps even her future career. If Mayhem doesn't talk to her ex-husband, Debbie will have to look for a new job. Debbie, this is for you. Alex smiled and handed her the bouquet. Thank you. Debbie accepted the flowers. She was pleased to receive them. She couldn't remember the last time she received flowers as a gift from a manual. Any plans? Where should we go? Alex asked. I don't know. The woman was a bit lost. She hadn't gone anywhere with anyone for a long time, so she was a little disoriented. I suggest dropping Finn off at home and then going to a cafe. Alex suggested. Maybe we could all go somewhere together. Debbie asked, noticing how disappointed the boy looked. For example, to the movies. I heard there's a wonderful family movie playing now. I'm okay with that. What do you say, son? The man looked at Finn. I'm in. The boy cheered. To start with, let's go to a cafe and have a little snack, Debbie suggested. She could see the emotions Finn was going through. The boy wanted to be with his father, and at the same time, he understood that he didn't want to interfere with his dad. I'm terribly hungry. How about you? Honestly, I am too, Finn replied, looking at his father. Decided. Let's go to the cafe, Alex said. The man opened the car door for Debbie. The woman smiled and got into the car. She was so absorbed in this situation that she didn't notice Jerry still standing by the window, watching. The man was displeased with the unfolding situation, realizing that his prey was slipping away from him. It angered him even more. He understood that he had to get back at Debbie, come up with something to make her feel bad. Meanwhile, Debbie was doing well. She sat in the cafe, sipping hot tea and enjoying a delicious pastry. I've never been much of a sweet tooth, Alex smiled. But watching you devour that sponge cake makes me want to try it too. Give it a try. It's insanely delicious, Debbie said. You convinced me. The man ordered the same pastry for himself. After the cinema, Alex and Debbie sat on a bench, discussing the plot of the movie they had just watched. Meanwhile, Finn swung on the swings. The boy watched his father interact with Debbie and dreamed that this teacher would become his mom. No, he had his own mom, but she abandoned him and ran off with another man. His father hid the truth from him, but Finn's grandmother told him everything. It was Finn's birthday, and he hoped his dad would spend it with him. But Alex was called in for work, and Finn was very disappointed. Grandma, why did Dad leave again? The boy asked. He didn't want to cry, but tears streamed down his cheeks. Grandson, your dad has this job. You know he protects us and you, his grandmother explained. He understands that if he doesn't show up for training, things could go very wrong. People who depend on him might get hurt. So he's a very responsible person. Not like your mom. Why is my mom not responsible? The boy asked. Finn often asked his dad about his mom, and he always said she was just tired of following her husband and decided to live separately for a while. But soon she would rest and come back to the family. Because she left you, finding another manual, now she has a new husband and a new child, the woman said. She immediately regretted her words, seeing how upset the boy was. But we love you more than anything in the world. Since then, Finn never brought up conversations about his mother with his father. He understood that he had no one closer and dearer than Alex. Despite his strict parenting, his dad was fair, and Finn appreciated that. His mother, on the other hand, never once called her son to inquire about his well-being. Seriously, Debbie said. She and Alex were sitting on a bench, and the man told her about the boy's mother. Since she left you, she hasn't called even once. She doesn't have time for Finn right now. She has 2 little kids at the moment. I get it. But taking 5 minutes to call her son and see how he's doing is not that hard. The woman got angry. She divorced you, not Finn. Besides, she saw who she was marrying. She didn't anticipate what it's like to travel to different garrisons, the man said, looking at his son. The boy, who was observing his father, smiled. At first, she was happy to be in a new city where she could start fresh. But over 4 years, we changed locations 3 times. Setting up a new home was on her. She would wallpaper, change plumbing. I couldn't help her at all since I was always at work. I would only come home to sleep. And when we had to move again, she had a breakdown. She gave me an ultimatum. Either I resign, or we divorce. I tried to convince her to endure a bit longer. that everything would change soon. But she wouldn't listen. She yelled that I destroyed our family. And in one fine moment, coming home, I found a note where she wrote that she's leaving me because she found another manual, and Finn is staying with me because she's starting anew. Oh my. Debbie sighed. She couldn't understand how someone could abandon their own child. Her thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. Hello. Debbie answered. Sweetheart. Hello. How are you? Mr. Fon's voice came through. Everything is good. And you? The woman replied. Sweetheart, I'm calling for a reason. Mayim and I are inviting you for a family dinner tomorrow at 7 o'clock to share some very important news. All right. Debbie nodded. See you tomorrow. Then, Mr. Thorne hung up. Debbie's heart was pounding. What could this news be? Did Mayim talk to her ex-husband? Lord, let tomorrow come quickly. Although her father said it's a family dinner, it means all the children from both sides are invited. It means Rose and her husband will be there. Alex, what are you doing tomorrow? Debbie unexpectedly asked. Looking at the manual, nothing for now. I'm on vacation, and I have plenty of free time. Then I invite you to dinner at my father's and his woman's. Debbie felt anxious all day. Why is her father gathering them? What's the reason for the family dinner? How will her relatives perceive Alex? And if Jerry is there, how will he behave? Coming to work, Debbie met Jerry in the school corridor. Hello, Debbie greeted, passing by the principal. However, the man didn't even spare a glance for the math teacher. He walked past her as if he hadn't noticed. The woman shrugged. Debbie was happy that Jerry had stopped bothering her. In the evening, Alex picked her up. When Debbie got into the car, the man handed her a bouquet of flowers. This is for you. Alex smiled. Alex, thank you so much. Debbie sighed happily. But you didn't have to. Why? Why can't I give flowers to a woman I like? He said. Because they're insanely expensive. She replied. But not more than your emotions. Alex shook his head. If it soothes you even a bit, I can afford to give flowers. So please, let's not bring up this question again. All right. Debbie agreed. It pleased her that there was a man next to her who treated her like a beloved woman. So, before we get to your dad's, you have to tell me his name. And please, tell me what I should know about your relatives, the man said. Debbie sighed. She briefly told him about her brother Martin and his fiancée Carol, about her father, and Mayim. So, your director Jerry is going to be your future stepfather. Does Mayim know about this? Yes. I sent her the video Finn recorded, and she promised to talk to her ex-husband, who works in administration. Mayim said he would definitely help sort things out with Jerry. Understood. The man nodded. He appreciated honesty in relationships. While Alex didn't exactly welcome family members entering romantic relationships on the side, he wasn't judgmental about it. Certainly, Debbie was wrong to become Jerry's mistress, but she had the intelligence and strength to break off that relationship. Moreover, she didn't hide the issue of her ex-lover's advances and honestly admitted everything. If Mayim didn't help Debbie, Alex would always support this sweet math teacher. Debbie and her companion arrived at Mr. Thorne's house. The woman saw that Martin and his fiancée were standing near the entrance. Little brother, hi. Carol, how are you? Debbie approached her brother's fiancée and hugged her. Everything is good. Carol smiled in response. I see you're not alone. Martin scrutinized Alex as the man approached. Let me introduce you. Debbie hesitated. She didn't know how to introduce her companion. I'm Alex, Debbie's friend. The man extended his hand to Martin. I hope our relationship will soon reach a new level, and I'll become a close friend. We hope for that too. Martin shook the hand of his sister's companion. It's high time for my Debbie to start a family, Martin. Carol gave her fiancé a disapproving look. She saw how Debbie blushed after her brother's words. What did I say wrong? I think my sister should have her own family by now. And thank God, there's a worthy man who can make her happy. Otherwise, Debbie is just focused on work. Honestly, I think the same way. A woman like Debbie shouldn't be alone. And I'm lucky that there wasn't a worthy person next to her. Alex smiled. Yes, it's a problem with finding the worthy ones now. But our Debbie deserves the very best man. Carol agreed. Debbie smiled. It was pleasant to hear such words. Could Alex be the one she would work hand in hand with for the rest of her life? Suddenly, Debbie got scared. What if she turns out to be like Alex's first wife? What if she can't endure the constant moves from city to city? What if Finn doesn't want to see her as his father's wife? What to do then? Debbie, is everything okay? Alex asked, noticing the change in the woman's mood. Yes, everything is fine. Debbie nodded, smiling. She didn't want to think about the negatives. The young people, approaching the apartment, pressed the doorbell. Mayhem opened the door. Hello, Debbie said as they entered the apartment. She smiled at the woman. After the last visit, Debbie had reconsidered her attitude towards Mayhem. Hello, come in. Mayhem smiled back. She looked a bit cautious at Martin, who behaved somewhat reserved. Kids, why did it take you so long? Mr. Thorne, displeased, asked coming out of the living room. We came on time, Martin replied firmly. He was a bit upset with his father for not calling him once after their argument. Dad, Mayhem, meet Alex, my close friend. Debbie introduced her companion. Nice to meet you. Mayhem smiled. Did you really have to bring him here today? Mr. Thorne whispered to his daughter. Today is supposed to be a purely family dinner. Consider him a part of my family. And if you want Alex to leave, then I leave with him. Debbie replied. Go to the living room, Mayhem said, noticing the host's reaction. I'm glad to meet you. Debbie took Alex's hand, and they both entered the living room where Mayhem's children were already present. Jerry stood by the window, talking with Ross. All right, everyone is here. Let's gather around the table, Mr. Thorne announced. Could someone please tell us why we've all been gathered? Martin asked. Mayhem and I have decided to get married. And in a month, we'll have a wedding, the apartment owner announced with a solemn tone. Seriously? Didn't you forget that Carol and I are getting married in a month too? The son looked at his father with resentment. What's wrong with having our weddings on the same day? Mr. Thorne asked genuinely, not understanding his son's anger. Dad, are you even hearing yourself? Martin felt like what was happening was some kind of surrealism. For Carol and me, our wedding is very important because we're getting married for the first time and forever. And we want it to be our special day. What nonsense, Jerry snorted. Mayhem, Mr. Thorne, I'm very happy for you. Don't listen to anyone. Get married whenever you want. Pay no attention to anyone else. And nobody asked you, Martin retorted. They asked. And quite frankly, Jerry decided to vent his anger on Debbie's brother. I believe that building a family is the most precious thing in life. When two loving hearts unite their lives, it's simply magical. When I married Rose, I was overflowing with happiness. And I'm glad I have a family, a loving wife, and a daughter. And you change mistresses like gloves, Debbie said before she could think. She was just angry that Jerry had so rudely intruded into the conversation between her father and brother. Debbie's words had a bombshell effect. There was silence in the living room. Everyone was looking at Debbie. What do you mean changing mistresses like gloves? Rose whispered, looking at her husband and then at Debbie. She expected Mr. Thorne's daughter to confess that she just wanted to get back at the school director where she worked. Sorry, I didn't mean to drop this truth bomb on you like that, Debbie said apologetically. But unfortunately, it's true. She shrugged. And why aren't you saying that you were one of them? Jerry hissed maliciously. He wanted to hurt Debbie. He didn't think that Alex knew the whole truth about their relationship. You willingly shared a bed with me, and now you pretend to be so good. I just felt sorry for you when you said you were living with your wife only for the sake of the child. And you dream of divorcing the detestable Rose because she, like ballast, is pulling you down. Debbie retorted. "Jerry, is this true?" Rose whispered. She pressed her hand to her mouth to avoid screaming from the emotional pain that enveloped her. The news of her husband's betrayal simply undermined Rose. "No, darling, it wasn't like that at all." Jerry quickly approached his wife, wanting to embrace her, but the woman wouldn't allow it. She walked over to her brother and stood behind him. Ross crossed his arms, signaling to his sister's husband that if he tried to touch Rose even with a finger, he'd be in trouble. "Rose, sweetheart, let's talk," Jerry pleaded, reaching out to his wife. "No, don't touch me." The woman was on the verge of hysteria. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but Rose was oblivious to it. Her life seemed to be crumbling like a sandcastle in the wind. For years, she had blindly trusted a person who, taking advantage of that trust, betrayed her. Debbie felt awful. She didn't want to say anything to Rose, but it just happened. She looked at the woman, whom she once considered her rival, with a guilty gaze. Alex, offering support, took Debbie's hand. He could feel the woman going through a tough time. At that moment, Martin approached her sister, indicating that Debbie could count on him too. Seeing that his wife, who had tolerated all his antics before, turned away from him, Jerry got angry. He realized he was alone. "What? Got what you wanted? Revenge?" He shouted at Debbie. "I never intended to." The woman was a bit flustered. She already regretted not being able to control her emotions. "You've destroyed my family." Jerry continued to aggress. "Now both my daughter and the unborn child will be without a father." "You should have thought about that earlier," Mayhem said. "You started dating Debbie when your wife was 4 weeks pregnant. She seduced me." Jerry defended himself. "Fine. Let's say she did." Mayhem agreed. "Then why did you harass Debbie when she left you?" "Who told you that?" the man asked. "She just can't get over it. Convinced teachers to file a collective complaint against me with the City Department of Education, claiming I'm a bad principal." "That's not true. It didn't happen." Debbie shook her head. "I know. Debbie, don't worry." Mayhem smiled at her future daughter-in-law. "That's Jerry's style. Whenever he breaks up with a toy he's tired of, he seeks revenge." "What do you mean?" Debbie frowned. "Jerry calls his father-in-law and starts complaining about a teacher who's harassing him," Mayhem explained. "And since my ex-husband doesn't have time to investigate all the details, he helps Jerry get rid of the woman chasing other women's husbands, all for the sake of his daughter's peace of mind." "But how is that possible?" Debbie couldn't understand what was happening. This man dated women, professed love to them at the moment, and then disposed of them like unwanted possessions. And why did Victor go along with Jerry? Blind paternal love is to blame for that. Mayhem shrugged. Now that Victor knows the truth, he promised to get to the bottom of it all. If it's confirmed that Jerry misled him, justice will be restored. What justice? Jerry couldn't hold back. He understood that the only way to avoid punishment from Victor for deception was to beg for Rose's forgiveness. "My dear, beloved, don't listen to them. Debbie set them against me. She couldn't forgive me for choosing you, so now she's seeking revenge on both of us. She wants me to suffer as she did when I broke up with her. Do you believe me?" "I don't know," Rose whispered. For so many years, she had blindly believed in her husband that she now couldn't discern who was telling the truth. "Rose, my dear, I promise you that you will never doubt me again. If you stay with me, I will never betray you," Jerry pleaded. "If you forgive him again, you'll be a fool." Ross reacted harshly. "People like your husband never change, and stay out of it," Jerry said. Rose started to believe him again, and Ross could break that fragile thread of trust at any moment. Jerry couldn't allow that. "Rose, let's go home. Our daughter is waiting for us. Let's send the nanny away and be at home, just like before, as a family," Jerry suggested. "Rose, if you forgive him again, you will permanently lose my respect," Ross threatened. "I understand that you love him, But you should love yourself more and not let any opportunist work all over you. Don't listen to him. Jerry persisted with his wife. He's just jealous of us. We've been together for so long, and Ross is still living alone. I'd rather live alone than with such a hyena like you. Ross retorted, leave me alone. All of you. Rose shouted. She rushed out of the apartment, slamming the door loudly. Debbie ran after her. Rose couldn't be left alone in such a mood. She might do something impulsive. Alex followed Debbie. Jerry wanted to go after his wife, but Ross stood in his way. Don't even think about it, the young man warned. Martin decided to support his son-in-law, standing by his side. But my wife is there, Jerry weakly objected. He knew he couldn't stand against two strong men. Jerry sat on the couch, holding his head in his hands. He understood that his career had come to an end. His father-in-law wouldn't let him work as a principal. At least, not in this city. Debbie, rushing out onto the street, was bewildered. Rose was nowhere to be seen. Okay, you go right, and I'll go left, Alex commanded, following Debbie. The woman quickly ran in the direction Alex indicated, carefully looking around, trying not to miss Rose. Unexpectedly, she saw Rose standing on the edge of the bridge, gazing down at the turbulent river. A chill ran down Debbie's spine. She understood that one wrong move, and it would be over. Debbie sprinted towards the bridge. If she was late, she would never forgive herself. Debbie ran towards the bridge, fearing she might be too late. She realized she was partly responsible for Rose ending up in this state. The woman scolded herself for her lack of restraint. If she could turn back time, she would never have gotten involved with Jerry, especially now that she had met Alex. Debbie approached Rose. The woman stood on the edge of the bridge, ready to jump at any moment. The pale skin of Rose's face betrayed her nervous state. At that moment, Alex joined them. He carefully watched Rose, ready to prevent the irreversible at any moment. How could he do this to me? Why? Rose asked, looking down at the river. Rose, understand, it's not about you. Debbie tried to speak calmly, not to startle the woman. Jerry is just that kind of person. I love him, Rose said as if she didn't hear Jerry's former lover. Rose, let's go home, Debbie suggested, hoping that Rose would agree. You haven't forgotten that your mom is getting married soon. It's a very emotional moment, and she will need your support. I always thought that my family was the strongest and perfect, and it turns out my husband lived with me only because it was convenient for him. I looked at my friends who divorced their husbands and thought they were to blame for ending up in such a situation. Now I find myself in the same situation, with a child in my arms and pregnant. So who needs me now? Rose poured out her feelings. Rose, don't talk nonsense. Debbie tried to distract her from dark thoughts. You have children who need you very much. And imagine, if something happens to you, do you think Jerry will take care of their upbringing? The first thing he'll do is send them to an orphanage. Alex looked at Debbie with surprise, but she just waved her hand to keep him out of this conversation. He resumed, closely monitoring Rose to prevent any irreversible actions. Lies. Jerry loves his children, Rose shouted. Jerry loves no one but himself. He always complained about how difficult it was for him to be with a wife like you. Debbie decided to hit Rose where it hurt, appealing to her maternal instinct. And his daughter simply irritates him. Thank goodness you took care of Fiona when he came home from work, and the child didn't bother him to relax. So think for yourself about what to do next. Of course, you can jump, but it won't make it easier for your daughter to live in an orphanage. No, that won't happen, Rose said decisively. She stepped away from the edge of the bridge and approached Debbie. My children will live with me. Smart move. Debbie breathed a sigh of relief. Remember, besides you, your children are not needed by anyone, because you are their mother. Soon all three of them returned to Mr. Fon's apartment. The shouts of the apartment owner and his son immediately reached them. Why can't we have two weddings on the same day? Mr. Fawn genuinely wondered. It would be so symbolic, father and son finding happiness. And we decided to register our relationships at the same time. Dad, are you seriously not getting it? Martin sighed wearily. For Carol and me, this is a special day, and it should be ours alone. I understand everything. So, what do we do now? We just need to wait a bit, Mayhem said with a smile. So, we'll postpone our wedding. But I don't want to, Mr. Fawn said in a whiny tone. For the sake of peace in your family, we need to. The woman approached the apartment owner and hugged him. If you have to choose between our wedding and your son's wedding, you shouldn't have any doubts. Fine. If you think so, let's postpone the wedding. The man agreed. Thank you, Martin whispered, looking at his future stepmother. Debbie smiled. She entered the living room, followed by Rose and Alex. Daughter, Mayhem exclaimed and approached Rose. Thank God you're okay. The woman hugged her daughter. Mom, if it weren't for Debbie, I would have done something foolish, Rose admitted. She pressed herself to Mayhem. If it weren't for Debbie, there wouldn't have been such situations. Ross smirked. If it weren't for Debbie, there would have been someone else, Martin retorted. Despite his sister's behavior, he was ready to defend Debbie, no matter what anyone said. At that moment, Rose noticed that Jerry was nowhere to be found. Mom, where's Jerry? The young woman asked. I don't know. When you ran out, he disappeared. I thought he went after you. No, I didn't see him. Then I don't know where he is, Mayhem said. Most likely, he went home, Ross said thoughtfully. Assuming he doesn't have a new lover at the moment. Rose picked up her phone and dialed Courtney's nanny number, who was taking care of Fiona. She wanted to warn her not to leave the apartment until Rose returned. It's strange. Courtney isn't answering. Rose frowned. She began to feel uneasy, as it had never happened before that the nanny didn't respond to her calls. Maybe something happened. Calm down, sis. Ross approached Rose. Everything is fine. Maybe she's putting Fiona to bed, and that's why she's not answering your calls. At 8 in the evening, Alex asked, looking at the time doubtfully. Something happened to Fiona. I need to get home urgently. Rose panicked. I'm with you, Ross declared firmly. If you don't mind, Alex and I will go with you, Martin said. Why? Rose asked in confusion. Just in case. Ross nodded. He understood that Jerry was in such a state that he was ready for anything. As soon as the men left the apartment, Mayhem suggested to the remaining ones to have a cup of tea. Mom, how can we think about tea now? Rose protested. She kept calling the nanny, but the response was always, the subscriber is out of the network coverage area. Daughter, you need to focus on the baby right now. Mayhem smiled, trying to calm Rose down. 20 minutes later, Ross called and said that there was no one in the apartment, including Jerry and Fiona. Moreover, documents related to Fiona were missing. Jerry kidnapped Fiona. Rose screamed. Suddenly, a sharp pain in her lower abdomen twisted the woman, and she lost consciousness. Debbie stared in horror at the paramedic examining Rose. She realized that she was involved in what was happening to this pregnant woman. Debbie, you're not to blame for anything, Mayhem whispered to the young woman. To be honest, I always told my daughter that her husband was a womanizer. But Rose insisted that I was making it up because I didn't like him. To avoid sad consequences, we need to hospitalize Rose, the paramedic said. Is it that serious? Mayhem asked in fear. I can't say anything specific for now, but one thing is clear. There's a threat of a miscarriage, the man explained. So, we need to take your daughter to the hospital for a thorough examination and to address the cause of the threat. I can't go to the hospital right now. Rose tried to get up from the sofa where she was lying. I need to find my daughter. No, sis. You must go to the hospital, Ross said firmly, and we'll find my niece without you. You don't have to worry about it. No, I've said everything. The pain prevented the woman from finishing her sentence. Rose curled up from the intense pain, clutching her hands to her stomach. Quickly to the hospital, the doctor commanded, with Ross and Alex placing Rose on a stretcher. They carried her into the car. Mayhem went to the hospital with her daughter. Debbie, find Jerry, Mayhem said, turning near the door and looking at her future stepdaughter. Bring Fiona back to us. Sure, Debbie promised. As soon as Alex and Ross returned to the apartment, the young people began to discuss what to do next. We need to report to the police. Let them start searching for Jerry, Debbie suggested. But is he deprived of parental rights? Alex raised his eyebrows. The police will tell us that he is the father and has the right to take his daughter on any trip. What should we do then? The woman was confused. Search, Alex replied confidently. Where? Debbie asked. I suggest splitting into several groups, Ross suggested. Alex with Debbie, Martin with Carol, Mr. Fawn and I, and start searching the city. Maybe someone will see them. I have another suggestion, Alex said thoughtfully. I have a friend who works in the highway patrol. We can give him Jerry's details, his photo, and the car's make and number. Listen, what if the nanny is involved in this case? Carol frowned. Maybe Jerry is hiding at her place. That's an idea, Martin agreed. Ross, do you know where Courtney lives? No. The young man shook his head. I know. Mr. Fawn unexpectedly spoke. Mayhem and I once picked up Fiona from the nanny. Let's go, Alex said decisively. 20 minutes later, 3 cars stopped near Courtney's house. All right. Ross and I will go up to Courtney's apartment. And you wait for us here, Alex said. I'm coming with you, Mr. Fawn said. No, someone has to stay on the street. Who might see Courtney? You never know what. Alex shook his head. So, look around carefully. The young men entered the building, leaving the rest of the family outside. Oh, Debbie, Mr. Fawn shook his head. Look at what you've done. Dad, I understand perfectly well, the woman said wearily. There's no need to remind me of my mistake. Because of you, Rose ended up in the hospital. The man continued. Dad, maybe you should back off from your daughter. Martin got angry. She understands everything herself, and there's no need to belittle her for it now. None of us is without sin. Or are you so perfect that you can point out others' mistakes? At least I didn't break up other families, Mr. Fawn replied. But you couldn't keep your own, Martin said. I'm not responsible for your mother's death, Mr. Fawn said. It was a sensitive topic for him. You are, Martin objected. You and Mom were building your business together. She didn't even have time to see a doctor, although she felt worse with each passing month. And you saw it but didn't insist on a medical examination. Everything suited you, but your mom said everything was fine. The man tried to justify himself. She said it was just fatigue. What else was Mom supposed to say? Martin asked in a tired tone. She saw that your business was taking off, flourishing. She didn't want to abandon you at that moment. And when Mom went to the hospital, it was already too late. Mr. Fawn looked at his son and remained silent. It seemed as if he only now realized that in pursuit of his dream, he had triggered his wife's illness. And now, instead of supporting your daughter, as Mayhem does, you belittle her at every opportunity. Martin continued expressing the accumulated emotional pain. You deal with the problems of your beloved woman's children, but you don't care about yours. What makes you think that? I love you more than life itself, he replied. Your actions say otherwise, Martin smirked. You constantly told Debbie that she was bad. You didn't even consider me. You tried to ruin my wedding. How? The man genuinely wondered. I just thought it would be wonderful if we got married on the same day. But you explained that it's important for you and Carol to have that day just for yourselves. And I understood. Kids, am I such a terrible father to you? You're not bad. It's just, Martin hesitated. He didn't know how to convey to his father everything that had accumulated over the years. We've never heard a kind word from you. You only scolded us and pointed out our mistakes. I thought you didn't need praise, Mr. Fawn blushed. You needed criticism to avoid making the same mistakes in the future and to become stronger. At that moment, Alex and Ross came out of the entrance. Jerry took the girls to Courtney's country house about 10 minutes ago. Alex said, "We have the address, so we can go. Aren't you afraid that the nanny's mom will warn her daughter, and then Jerry will go somewhere else?" Debbie said, "No, she won't do that." The man replied, "We told her that if she informs her daughter that they are being sought, Courtney will become an accomplice in Fiona's abduction, and she believed it." Debbie asked in surprise, "Absolutely. Ross and I were very convincing." Alex smiled. "What are we waiting for?" Mr. Fawn asked. "Let's go." Alex looked at Debbie. "Don't worry, everything will be fine." Almost the entire way, Debbie remained silent, listening to Alex. The man entertained his companion with various stories from his life, trying to distract Debbie from sad thoughts. Approaching the gates of the house, the men decided to surround the house where Jerry and Fiona were hiding to avoid the possibility of escape. Debbie and Carol went with the men. Approaching the house, those present heard Fiona crying loudly. "I want my mom." The girl shouted, "Shut up." Immediately, Jerry ordered, "I'm your father, and you will live with me." "No, I want my mom," Fiona continued. "If you don't calm down, I'll lock you in the basement. And there are big, mean rats that will bite you." The man threatened. "No, don't." The girl became even more frightened. "I'll beat him." Ross threatened and decisively headed to the door. Alex and Martin followed him. Mr. Fawn, accompanied by the women, stayed near the gate. The men knocked firmly on the door, and Courtney, without asking, opened it. She did not expect them to find her so quickly. Suddenly, a window at the back of the house opened, and Jerry jumped out of it. Debbie shouted, "Alex, he's here." The woman rushed at her former lover to detain him. She didn't want Jerry to escape. Debbie firmly grasped Jerry's arm. "Let go of me." The man swung at Debbie to hit her, but he was intercepted by Mr. Fawn. "No one dares to hit my daughter." The man quickly subdued Jerry. Debbie was grateful to her father for the help. "Thank you," the woman whispered. At that moment, Martin and Alex approached, while Ross remained in the house with his niece and crying Courtney. "You are my daughter," Mr. Fawn replied, "and I want you to be happy." "I want that too." Alex hugged Debbie tightly. Debbie sat in the house, embraced by Alex. She looked at Jerry and couldn't understand where that arrogant, assertive, self-assured man had gone. Before her sat a person who only evoked pity. "What drove you when you decided to take my niece away?" Ross asked. The young man held Fiona close, who was wiping away tears. "Or did you think we would never find you?" "I have nothing to do with this," Jerry shouted. "She made it all up." The man pointed a finger at Courtney, who sat next to him, crying loudly. "She pursued me, told me to leave the family." "Lies." Courtney was in shock. "Jerry, why are you lying?" The girl clapped her eyes in confusion. She didn't understand why Jerry was shifting the blame onto her. After all, he persuaded her to take Fiona and hide. "Am I lying?" Jerry stood up and straightened his shoulders. Debbie saw in him again the same Jerry she had once loved. At least, that's how it seemed to her. She realized that he had found himself a new victim. "Who told me?" "Jerry, let's go." "So I succumbed to your persuasion." The man sat back down. "You accused me of all mortal sins. So I decided to lay low where you wouldn't find me. That's when the nanny decided to take advantage of the situation to take me out of the family." "Lies." "Jerry, why are you lying?" Courtney cried again. "You told me yourself that Rose is a bad mother who doesn't look after the child at all. That Fiona is only needed by her to keep you around. Today, when you came home, you said it was our only chance to become a family." "A family?" Jerry smirked. "Have you seen yourself? The man looked disdainfully at his daughter's former nanny. "Do you think I could marry such a country girl? What are you saying? You swore your love to me." Courtney said, "You can say anything to drag a girl into bed." Jerry sighed. "You caught one. Give flowers to win her over. And all you needed to do was say a couple of compliments. And that's it, she's mine. You're just like her." Jerry nodded his head towards Debbie. "Only she quickly understood and rejected me. And I don't like that. I immediately get excited to get the prey back into my nets. And as soon as I get what I want, I lose interest. Well, you're a scumbag." Debbie exhaled. "Is something wrong?" Jerry smirked arrogantly. "You used to like everything, especially in bed. You forget only one thing, that the bed is not the most important thing in life." Debbie retorted. "As soon as I realized that you, as a person, were like that, I immediately dumped you, if I want." Jerry start. "Oh, for God's sake, calm down already." Alex looked into Jerry's eyes. He quickly realized that dealing with a military man was not a good idea. Now, Debbie was completely lost to him. "I'm asking one last time, why did you take Fiona?" Ross tried to speak calmly. "I'm her father, and I have every right to take her on vacation." Jerry shrugged. "Or did I break the law? You know Rose is in the hospital." Mr. Thorne asked. "What's wrong with her?" Jerry asked with a worried tone. Tears appeared in his eyes. "I hope nothing serious." "You're right. Nothing serious." Debbie smirked. "They just put you in the hospital for no reason. You're to blame for everything." Jerry pointed a finger at Debbie. "If you hadn't appeared in my life, everything would be as it was before. It feels like we're going in circles." Alex sighed. "Everyone is to blame except yourself." "I'm glad Debbie told everything." Ross stroked his niece's head. "Otherwise, you would have deceived my sister for a long time and ruined the lives of your mistresses. I was the brightest event in their lives." Jerry proudly declared, "Enough of this. I'm done with it." Ross carefully stood up from his chair. "Fiona, this is Debbie. She is kind and good." He looked at his niece. "Why don't you go outside with her now? And she will tell you something very interesting." "Okay." The little girl just nodded in response. She approached Debbie. "Daughter, don't leave me." Jerry shouted in fear. He saw that the men were very determined. "Alex, just don't hit him." Debbie whispered to Alex. "Are you worried about him?" Alex asked. "No. So that he doesn't file a police report against you later." Debbie replied. "I don't want anything to happen to you. Don't worry. Everything will be fine." Alex promised and kissed Debbie on the cheek. Debbie took Fiona's hand, and the two of them went outside, where Carol and Martin were waiting for them. Courtney also followed them. The woman was scared and upset because she believed Jerry loved her. She was ready to do anything for him, and he betrayed her, trying to shift all the blame onto her. "Have you talked?" Martin asked, seeing his sister. "No. They asked us to leave," Debbie replied. They stayed for a man-to-man talk. After 20 minutes, the men came out of the house. Ross approached his niece and asked, "Ready to go to Mom?" "Yes." The girl nodded. She took her uncle's hand and, without looking back, went to the car. "Everything okay?" Alex asked, approaching Debbie. "Yes." The woman nodded and leaned against the manual. "Don't be afraid." "We didn't touch him," Alex whispered. "We just talked a bit. He won't bother you anymore." "Thank you." Debbie smiled. At that moment, Mr. Thorne approached them. He hugged his daughter tightly and said, "Forgive me." 2 months had passed. Debbie was extremely nervous because today her only brother was getting married, and now the floor is given to the groom's sister. The host solemnly announced. Debbie, Alex, and Finn are invited to share their warm wishes. Debbie nervously smiled. Alex took his beloved's hand, and the three of them walked to the center of the hall in the expensive restaurant that Mr. Thorne had paid for. The father fully sponsored his son's wedding. Martin initially refused, but the man insisted, "It's my duty." Mr. Thorne declared, after all that had happened, he changed his attitude towards the children. If before he took their achievements for granted, now he praised them. Mr. Thorne tried to financially assist the children, but they refused, stating that they worked and earned their living. The man realized that his children had truly become adults. Nevertheless, he tried to spend more time with them, inviting them to his home. Debbie looked at the attendees, among whom were Mayim, Rose with Fiona, Ross with his new girlfriend. Surprisingly, after everything that happened, these people became very close to the Thorne family. Rose filed for divorce immediately after being discharged from the hospital. Jerry resisted at first because his wife was pregnant. He tried to beg Rose for forgiveness, but she remained unyielding. Yes, she loved her husband, but after his numerous infidelities, she didn't want anything to do with him. Jerry used to come to his wife's house every day, which put Rose on edge. Everything changed when Victor had a serious talk with his son-in-law, and Jerry agreed to all of Rose's conditions. After the divorce, Jerry disappeared in an unknown direction. Rose was undoubtedly going through a tough time, but tried not to show it. She was in wonderful anticipation of her second child and focused on raising Fiona. Rose decided to dedicate herself to her children. Mayim, however, still hoped that it was a temporary solution and that her daughter would meet a wonderful man someday. After Jerry's dismissal, Kyla, Debbie's friend, was appointed as the acting school principal. The woman sincerely congratulated her friend because Kyla was told that if she handled her responsibilities well, she would be permanently appointed to the position after completing training. Debbie's life also fell into place. She had a loving man by her side, who she considered her rock, and equally beloved Finn, whom she considered her son. Debbie was happy. Dear Martin and Carol, Debbie spoke.